Welcome to the 40 Athletes Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Holzer, along with my good friend, Jim Huber. This podcast is based on our passion to use sports to transform lives in mind, body, spirit, and environment. We believe sports can have a significant positive impact in all areas of athletes' lives, and not just when they're playing. Our guest today is Chris Stathos. Chris enters his seventh season with the Super Bowl 54 champion Kansas City Chiefs. In his role as manager of partner development, he seeks to identify new strategic corporate partnerships opportunities for the Chiefs. Previously, he spent 5.5 years on the Chiefs partnership activation team, leading the strategy, renewal, and implementation of $10 billion annual book of corporate partnership businesses and generating nearly $60 million in business renewal and upsell revenue at that time. Chris, today we're talking about personal brand, and we're excited to have you on here today because you've gotten where you're at quite a young age. How are you doing today, first of all?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the time to be able to talk a little bit about leadership and different things that I'm working on and passionate about. So I'm excited.
We hear all the time about building your personal brand. What have you found to be the best way to really, like, if somebody's starting out brand new, how do you start to build a personal brand anyways?
Yeah, I think it's about how you're putting yourself out there to the world, right? So what are the things that people are going to see when they search for you? I always, share obviously the life lessons of, make sure what you're putting out on social media certainly is up to snuff. But are you active on LinkedIn? Are you do you have a personal website that you can point people to that kind of has a little bit about your resume? Things that can kind of set you apart a little bit from the rest of the crowd. So I really started that at a young age in college, especially was kind of the focus for me of where did I want to go and how was I going to get there? And part of that was building this brand of who's Chris, right? And what do people remember when they think about Chris? And, some of the things could even be, small and even funny sometimes, but people still remember you for those things. So how do you set yourself apart in a unique way to ultimately get where you're trying to go?
And how does your personal brand also, represent the team, the Chiefs, the organization? What do you, as you are, navigating the personal brand of Chris Stathos, how does that extend to, being an employee of the Chiefs?
Yeah, well, you're always representing the brand, right? Whether or not you have the logo on the piece of clothing you're wearing, or if you have the jersey on as a player, you're always representing the Chiefs, right? So if Patrick Mahomes is out there off the field doing something, he's representing the Chiefs, whether or not he wants to be. In the same way, in a different way, though, I'm representing the Chiefs when I'm out in the community doing work or talking to students or whatever I'm doing. I'm still representing the Chiefs because people identify me as being part of that organization. They're going to, whether or not fair, they're going to identify me in some way with the Chiefs. So I always have to be cognizant of that. Protecting the brand and protecting the shield is kind of the thing that we always hear, at the Chiefs.
So, Chris, going into that, I talk to a lot of parents and, student athletes about the hard knock facts. It's hard to play even college sports. Less than 3% of kids that play in high school seniors go on to play NCAA school, and it's really less than 6% if you include NAI and junior colleges. And recruiting is such a big part of it. How would you encourage and recommend individuals to develop a personal brand that would be attractive for colleges to want them to be a part of their program?
I think finding what you're passionate about outside the sport that you play is huge. Because to the point of, you're likely not going to go professional in whatever sport it is that you play more often than not, right? The statistics are just against you. Not to say you shouldn't go pursue those things in college. That's definitely a great route to go to continue to, whether it's further education through that sport. But you have to find that thing that defines you outside of your sport. And it could be tied to sports, could go back to sports in some way. You may want to get into coaching. Obviously, Jim, I know you do that and have done that. But what is it that you're passionate about in figuring that out while you're maybe still pursuing this dream in sports or that for me is the big thing I always encourage, because I do think there's value to be a student athlete. And if you can't maybe do the internships because you're a student athlete, I always look at that as that's still a great thing that you're doing, because you're learning about leadership, you're learning about, teamwork, there's so many good values that you take away from sports, but what are going to be the things that you do in that life after sports, right?
So when you talk about like finding your passion, communicating that passion, I'm sure you talk to individuals like not spending 8 hours on, say, social media, communicating your passion, because then individuals think like, well, do you do anything else besides social media? But besides that balance, how do you encourage individuals to get their information out to individuals that they want to maybe see them and what they are and what they can bring to an organization?
I think for me, it starts with just reaching out. You'll never know what you could maybe do unless you reach out to someone who's in a position to help you. Now, you have to be careful to make sure that you don't go and ask for something other than maybe someone's time to start, right? So if I don't know you, and there's an ask of, hey, can I have this job or this volunteer opportunity? Well, let's get to know each other first, right? But those are great ways to get your name out there. And that's really how I started in the field that I'm in, was just finding an opportunity to volunteer. Most of my internships actually were unpaid. And so those little things that you can do along the way to get people to know who you are, I look back and I kind of call these things my game changers, right? The opportunities that I had, the people along the way, mainly professors and people associated with my alma mater, who stepped alongside me and said, hey, I'm going to support you in this. I know you're passionate about this. So you got to find those cheerleaders, you got to find those opportunities. And it really just starts with kind of putting out some questions and saying, hey, will you help me? And usually that starts with just understanding, what someone does, kind of informational interviews, those sorts of things. So it just starts with asking questions, asking good questions.
What is it? So going back to that, sounds like you talk about having a servant heart, right? Putting your ego aside, serving somebody else. What kind of questions would you suggest that they ask instead of asking like, hey, can I have this? What questions could they ask to get that individual interested, to allow them to be a part of what they're doing, to be mentored by them, whatever that might be?
Yeah, I think it's how did you get to where you are, to, whether or not we like to admit it, people love talking about themselves, right? So being able to, ask someone to tell their story is usually a great route to go. What would you suggest to someone in my position? It's a very easy way of saying, hey, how can I get to where you are without asking you to give it to me, right? Because I've got to do the work. I've got to put in the time and the effort. You can't do that for me. But asking questions of understanding the path that people take to get to where they are, it's different, right? Everybody has a different path, but you start to find commonalities, right? You find people who are really hard workers, who hustled, who just got to know people and build genuine relationships. Because for me, that's the business I'm in, is a relationship business. I have to make people feel at ease when we're talking about big investments of millions of dollars over the lifetime of a contract. That's not an easy thing to go ask for. So you have to make sure people trust you, right? So it really just starts with asking those questions about, leadership and career path. And that's really why I'm so passionate about those topics, because I've seen where people can go wrong, and I've seen where people can go right. And I really want people to take the right path rather than fall into the trap of, asking those wrong questions that's going to turn someone off, and they're going to be out an opportunity to maybe learn, right? So that's kind of what it is about for me.
So when you say that, this, and I know it, sometimes the opportunities might not present itself when you first seek it, right? Mm-hmm. You might ask questions. They might not have something available for you at that time. They might not be able to help you. How do you suggest that individuals stay in contact in a way that doesn't seem like it's a burden on somebody, you're hindering on them? It's like more of a way that you're just staying connected, getting your name in front of them in a good way. How would you suggest somebody going about that?
Yeah, it's really about adding value back to the person. And even if you're not truly adding value, letting them know you're thinking about them in a way that's not at all, selfish. So if I go see something, that a company's doing, and I really like that company, I maybe want to go work for that company, and I know someone there in HR or in sales or whatever it may be, just sending them an email saying, hey, I saw this. This is great. I'm excited for you all. And I think this is going to take you down a great path, right? Or, just taking something that's out there, that's public, and using it to help show that you're really interested in what this company or this organization might be doing. The other thing too is to not get too caught up in the organization. There are great opportunities that exist outside of working in the NFL, and people reach out to me all the time because they want to work in the NFL or they want to work in professional sports. And I think that's great. And by no means am I trying to shut down that interest, but also it's important to remember that there are so many opportunities. Let's take my industry, for example, in professional sports or just sports business in general. There's so many opportunities outside of the NFL, outside of professional sports. There's some great learning lessons you can have from working at a brand that's tied to sports in some way, or working for an agency, or working for a minor league team, or there's just a plethora of opportunity. And to get caught too much up in the hype of professional sports and the glamour, sometimes it derails people because they get frustrated when they can't break in because it's so competitive. So I always really encourage people that way too, to make sure they're not getting too caught up in the who, but really think about the what. What are you passionate about? How can you express that? And does it have to be with a professional sports team or what have you? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So, like you got your first internship, you got your first opportunity. It wasn't paid. How did you build those relationships, like after you got your foot in the door? Like, what did you do to continue to nurture those relationships?
That's a good question. I just made sure that I always kept kind of coming back to those people, building just a way of kind of, making sure I remember, almost a personal CRM of how am I connecting back to these folks. Whether it's been 3 months since I last talked to blank at the Browns or the Chiefs or whoever it was that I interned with, and making sure that I was following up and staying, in a timely fashion, was staying, close to them. And that really helped because, using my current job, for example, I'd interned at the Chiefs, but I'd then gone on to do a lot of other things. And then when it was time for me to come out of college, I spent my entire senior year and that Chiefs opportunity came open. I really knew I wanted it because it was so different than any other opportunity I'd been looking at. And so I just kept kind of following up. I just kept, making sure that the relationship with the guy who was hiring for that role was in a good place, that they knew I was interested. It was aggressive in some ways, but it wasn't over the top. I just made sure that you always want to make sure that you leave, whether it's the interview or what have you, letting the organization know you want the job. If they don't think you want the job, they're not going to give it to you. So just making sure that I kept reminding them why I would be a good candidate, the experience that I'd had up to that point, and why that would help me thrive in the role that I was applying for. So it's just about, it doesn't have to be regulated, and every 2 weeks you send in, like, it has to be authentic, but make sure that when you're doing it, that there's purpose and that, it's authentic, right?
Yeah. And sometimes, you get into an internship and sometimes like it doesn't fit right, or it doesn't feel right, like with the culture of the organization. How are you able to know that my personal brand also fits with the organizational brand of the Chiefs? How are you able to mesh those two together?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the values that a company, talks about. So for me, I looked at the mission statement of the Chiefs, and it really aligned a lot with, my own personal mission. Win with character is the first pillar of our mission statement. And for me, character is a huge thing. I want to be surrounded by people who are high integrity individuals, who are going to do the right thing. It's not going to be cutthroat. It's not going to be, doing the wrong thing, in the short term to get the long-term gain. You have to start and look at, do I know anything about what this organization stands for? There's, history is a big part of our mission as well. Our tradition is another pillar. So kind of what we were talking about before the show, there's a long history with the Chiefs, and I've, certainly seen how over the years, the team, even before I worked there, I was a fan, So you can see kind of how we honor those who've come before, and that's a big thing for me too. Personally, I'm very much someone who looks to people who are maybe just a little bit further down the line. I think that's why I have not collected, but I've taken on so many of these mentors in my life who, because they've had these experiences and they've been there before, the resource that they are is invaluable to me, because I can go and I can ask them, for advice anytime. And so all these things kind of just meshed together for me. And then because I knew the organization from working there as an intern, I had a pretty clear understanding of what I was getting into.
I want to dive into, you just said win with character, and at 40 Athletes, we're big into instilling life skills and character through sports. It's one thing to say win with character, but it's another thing to emphasize it on a daily basis and actually do it as part of your culture. What does the Kansas City Chiefs do on a daily basis to make sure that that is something that they stand for within everybody that's involved?
I think this past year has been a true test, right, of that. I think we've been really put to the test on, can we live out that value? Because winning with character in a time that doesn't feel like, there's a lot of knowns. You could take the easy route out and say, well, I'm just gonna try to make it by cutting a few corners. We've, as an organization on and off the field, made sure that that's not what we do. We could have on the field said, we're the Super Bowl champs. We're just going to kind of go out there and we're not going to improve. But of course, that's not what Coach Reid's going to do on the field. Off the field, we could sit back and say, oh, this year is really hard. It's not even worth going out and trying to do our jobs well. Let's just kind of take a pass this year, because no one's really going to call us out if we did, which we would get called out if we did do that. But we've gone out and we've been able to have success where other teams, and just speaking of my own departments, are down double-digit percentages, pretty high double-digit percentages in partnership sales, for example, in the world I live in. We're going to be even if not up. So that doesn't just happen. You have to set your mind to making sure that you are going to go out every day and win every day. And you have to have high character and high integrity to do that. So that's kind of how I look at, the challenges of the last 12 months, or a little less than 12 months. And what we've been able to do, I think, has shown that we've been able to live out that pillar.
So what does like the organization tell the players, like what winning with character is? What is that? Like when you make that statement, what does that mean?
Yeah, I think, not being in team meetings, I think it's pretty easy to look at the way this team rallied last year in the playoffs, right? 3 games, down double digits. And some teams could just sit back and say, look, it wasn't our year. We're not gonna fight. But this team did. And I think, the mantra of team lives inside this organization really strongly. We never got down, we never got too high, never got too low throughout the season. I was at the game in Denver when Patrick's knee was dislocated, and you could easily get that pretty low at that point, right? Thinking, okay, the guy is out for who knows how long. And then, 2 games later, he's back. But that's, a whole nother story, because he's an amazing athlete. But there's a sense of you're just, being even keel. I mean, I think you see that when you watch a game. You don't see Coach Reid get too animated most of the time. He's pretty level. I think that's pretty important, because it just displays what kind of team we want to be. We never want to be that team that's, again, on or off the field, that gets, again, too high or too low, because there's going to be so many challenges that come our way. We always have to maintain, some semblance of, just being level-headed, so that we can attack what comes at us as it comes.
So how do you attack, you mentioned staying level-headed. What are some specific things that you do? Because, when something comes at you, it's immediate, like it's a reaction, most of us, so how are you able to take those things that come at you, process them, and then get positive results from those things? Like, what do you do personally, Chris, that really helps you get in that zone?
Yeah, I think there's a lot for me of balance that has to be inserted into my days and my weeks. I've got a good team that I work with, and certainly making sure that we're always encouraging each other. That's going to keep us from sinking down too much into the woe is me mentality. But celebrating the wins, we got to make sure that as we do have victory, that we celebrate that. So there's kind of this balance of, okay, we're not going to let ourselves get too down on a loss, and we're not going to, but we are going to celebrate when we win. And then we're going to move on and we're going to keep going. So, I think that from the work standpoint helps me stay even. And then just having a good support system around me, my wife and my family, that helps me stay kind of grounded in who I am and, what's the main thing, it's kind of keeping the main thing. And, athletics and sports are so important to our lives in different ways, but what's more important? It's the family and the friends that are around us, the organizations we care about that do good work. There's for different things for different people, but you got to remember what your true core calling is. And that's for me how I kind of stay centered in it all when things are crazy and I'm not sure what to do next. I just remember that.
You've mentioned leadership a couple times through this, and I see leadership, I think, is really important to you. What are tips that you give individuals of how to be a leader that people truly want to follow?
Yeah, the way you just put it right there, the kind of servant leadership model of, you got to lead by doing. If you're not willing to go do the hard things with your people, with the people you're leading, then it's really hard to get them bought in, I think. So I've always really been a big proponent of servant leadership, because if you're too good for something, then pretty soon, your team's going to be too good for it too. So I've always been someone who's willing to do the work that I was doing as an intern. I remember when I was at the Browns, I was an intern, but I was, helping a training camp, and their property happened to be right up along a residential neighborhood. And there were some planks of fence that were rotted out and they needed replacing. So who did that? We did. But to this day, if that was the case at the Chiefs, I would definitely raise my hand and say, yeah, I'm willing to do that. I've done it. I've been there. And so I think that's really important. I also think too, from a leadership standpoint, something we always hear from our team president is being prepared for success. So you may not have a successful year on the field or off the field, but success will come. You got to put in the work, and you also have to be prepared when it comes. So, again, I'm grateful that I've been around for some pretty great years in the organization, but there were times, again, 2012 of 2-14, but we had partners that came on during those pretty lean years, and we really sold the idea of this team is going to bounce back. We are going to regain that those glory years, and we want you to be with us before we do. So when we actually get there, you will have bought in to the mission that we are trying to live out. So I always think about being prepared for success. I'm working on something right now that on the surface you would think, why are you doing that right now? And pretty soon, hopefully more people will know what it is. But, it's one of those things where we're looking ahead, not just a month or two, we're looking ahead a year or 3 or 5, because that's how we have to think if we're going to be successful. You can't be short-sighted. You have to think long-term. So those are a few things from a leadership standpoint that I think about, both the servant leadership aspect and then being prepared for success.
What suggestions could you give to a leader? And you've been around as being a leader. Sometimes people don't meet expectations. People aren't doing what they need to be doing. What suggestions can you give of how you would communicate to someone about what they need to be doing, maybe give them that constructive criticism and make them feel good about what it is you're communicating to them if they have a desire to want to get better.
Yeah, I think you have to, and everyone's got a different style. I personally think if you can set a plan and then go on and execute that plan, that's going to be your biggest opportunity to have success. Right? Like the football side, of course, they go out and they put together a game plan for how they're going to attack that week's opponent. And if they deviate away from it, they're probably not going to have success. But if they follow to it, the hope is that you're going to win. So I think having a clear-cut plan is really important, and working through that with your team members to say, okay, where do you want to be? And I'm fortunate to have a boss who said, hey, why don't you put together a personal business plan? I've got to put together the business plan for our department for where we're going to go and hit revenue goals. But you're going to be part of that. You're going to be one of the people that's contributing to those department goals. So why don't you go put together a plan for yourself of how you're going to reach not only those professional, goals for the Chiefs, but also going to do things in your personal life that you're wanting to do. So for me, that exercise, it wasn't even just an exercise. It really felt like, okay, I'm going to go execute on these 10 things. And that's going to be my measure and my benchmark for success. So I think if you can get people something to aim for and shoot for, then you can really get a lot of buy-in for where you're trying to take a group. If someone's maybe kind of underperforming, giving them something to shoot for. A lot of people tend to, love a good competition, right? So, especially athletes who are living that world every day. So that's kind of my personal philosophy on the topic.
Chris, as we move into the latter part of the show, we always ask our guests 4 questions, and we call it 4 Qs with 40 athletes. So our first one is this: what is the best life lesson sports has taught you?
It's a good question. I think I would say to find game changers in your life. I think the people for me have been the biggest impact, are the people who have been consistent mentors in my life and kind of that personal board of directors, right? So the people that I know I can call and say, hey, this is what's going on. I'm kind of struggling with this. Can you walk me through maybe how you would go about, fixing this situation? I think, just like a good coach, good mentors, good game changing, folks in your own life can do that for you. So my coaches are, 3 or 4 people that I know I can call. They're the 2 a.m. people, right? The people you could call in the middle of the night and they would answer the phone. There would be no hesitation. So that's where I've just seen, that I've been able to thrive, is when I've been really dialed into the people that have helped me along the way. Because when you're struggling, it seems like it's the biggest thing in the world. And if you can't get out of that, then you're not going to have a lot of success. So finding the people you can call, that's been a big game changer for me.
Yeah. Second question is, if you could spend time with anyone you admire in sports, passed away or alive, who would it be and why?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think a lot. I think this year we've all thought about, there's been so many people who we've lost, right? But I think, I'm an admirer of, of some of those folks. But growing up in Cleveland, LeBron, he was big, obviously when he came out of high school, and so I think more than his athletic ability, I've admired just the way that he's gone about his business off the court, right? So he sees, just like I do, that sports is this thing that's temporal, and you're not going to be a professional athlete forever if you are lucky enough to be one. So how do you set yourself up for success when you're done? And I think more athletes that have that kind of mentality, whether they're professionals looking for what is for them after, or it's collegiate athletes that are looking for what's next for them because they're not going to go pro, having that mindset of what's next, and planning for that is something I really admire about him. And I think other athletes are doing the same thing, but he just comes to mind as being a guy that grew up in Cleveland.
So Chris, question number 3 is, what is the best advice you have ever received from a coach you've worked with or played for?
I think don't care about the recognition. Don't worry about the accolades. Don't worry about the title. Don't worry about the the fanfare, because ultimately, again, those things are so temporal. And the thing that people are always going to remember about you is not the awards you won. It's the way that you invested in them. And so there are countless examples that I can think of, but one pointed one in particular of a guy that I got to know through the Chiefs in a really roundabout way, that 5 years ago, his goal was just to get to the home opener of the Chiefs because he's going through cancer treatment at Mayo Clinic. And fast forward 5 years to 2020, February 2nd, he and his family are sitting next to me at the Super Bowl because we've developed this relationship. And over the years, he's always told me, hey, if the Chiefs ever go to the Super Bowl, I'm going. I don't care what it costs. And thankfully, the Hunt family is so generous that they offered for us to be able to offer our friends and family, at cost tickets and things like that. So here we are, from being a perfect stranger 5 years ago, this guy's 30 days post stem cell transplant, to 2020. Here we are together at the Super Bowl. That to me is just, that's the platform I have. I have an awesome opportunity to impact lives. And I'm never going to do it to the level of Patrick Mahomes, but I have the opportunity to use the platform of the Chiefs to help better our community. So I think that's something that we would always, that's what I've taken away. I think, from coaches in my life, it's, again, don't care about the personal stuff. Focus on how you can invest in other people.
So let me ask this. The last question, number 4, is this, and I want you to think about this. So the Kansas City Chiefs won with character, right? And you're the president, GM, coach. You're in a war room, draft day. What is the one character trait or life skill that you would want to look for, or drafting this player to be a part of your organization? What one life skill or character trait you'd want that person to have?
I think the word resilience comes to mind, because I think you can't, you have to live out experiences in order to gain resilience, and you have to live out the negative along with the positive to build that. So you can't really teach it. It's just something that you have to grow in over time. And if you can be resilient, then you can do just about anything. You can make up for where maybe your skills lack, whether it's on or off the field. You can make up for that mental IQ piece with just the go-gettedness, the personal resilience. So that's what I look at and think, hey, if I can find someone to come work for me that's resilient and wants to win, and is willing to walk through, some growing pains, it's better than having someone who knows everything, right? So that's why I would look.
Well, you think about the Chiefs last year, talk about it, like Patrick Mahomes, knee, fighting through that resilient. The playoffs, I remember being both those playoff games, so they're like, they're getting their rears kicked, right, by the Titans and by the Houston Texans, and people thought season's over. Even the Super Bowl, they were losing. They made a play at the end and stayed with us. So if they stayed resilient, had a group of resilient players that were able to hold the Super Bowl, the trophy, right, to hold it. But if they weren't resilient, they wouldn't have had that.
Yeah, 100%. I think that was the motto of the team last year. The coach's tagline for the year, he comes up with something new every year to kind of motivate the team. But last year it was be great. So what are you going to do to be great when you step on the field? Or, for us that are not athletes, what are we going to do to be great every day that we go into work? How are we going to overcome the obstacles? And I'm glad I wasn't one of the ones on the field, because I certainly know where I was when it was 24-0 in the second quarter of that game against the Texans, and I know I was not in a great place. And so it was a moment of learning for me of, hey, there's some resilience that can be built there. But that it's definitely something that I think we all struggle with. especially in times that are very uncertain. So, but if you control what you can control, that's one thing that another mentor of mine always talked about. Then you'll be fine. Control what you can control.
Hey, that song last year when they did, you remember Pat Mahomes, Take Me Home, like Kansas City to Miami. Now I'm singing it this year. My kids were saying Kansas City to Tampa Bay, take me home. Let's go. Get
right.
the road. Come on. Hold that Lombardi Trophy twice. Let's go.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Chris, how can people get a hold of you, man? Like, you're giving us so many, nuggets of knowledge here. Where can they reach you?
Yeah, the best place for me is LinkedIn. You can find me obviously by my name, Chris Stathos. I'm obviously love to talk to students, especially but I really have a passion for getting in front of classrooms. So those who are maybe educators, I love to do that as well as kind of one-on-one coaching too. So I'm really passionate about developing future business professionals, and it's definitely not just in sports, because that's such a small niche of business, and I just think there's students out there that want to do something, but they don't know how to quite get there. And I've been able to live that out of kind of developing a path for taking kind of what was in my head and then getting it out there and going and doing it. So I love to kind of see that come alive in students. So feel free to reach out.
Well, Chris, thank you for being a part of our show today, and we'll be in touch soon, man.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Appreciate it.
If you're looking to transform your athletes, teams, organizations by teaching essential life skills through sports, like us on Facebook at 40 Athletes, subscribe to our 40 Athletes YouTube channel, and also be sure to check out our website at 40athletes.com. There you can enroll in our 24-week online course or schedule a discovery call today. For less than $1 a day per athlete, the 40 Athletes program can help you develop better players by helping them become better people. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the 40 Athletes podcast.